This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 89. Today's episode is brought to you by my new Fertility Boost group program. My group program includes 6 to 8 women who are also looking for a deeper understanding of fertility awareness and wanting to improve their cycles naturally. If you're listening to this episode during August 2016, when it's actually being released in real time, make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/programs for more information and to reserve your spot. If you're listening to this episode after August of 2016, then head over to fertilityfriday.com/programs to find out when the next group program is starting and how to get on the waitlist. Welcome to the 89th episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Lisa from fertilityfriday.com, and this is your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. I started this podcast because I believe that every woman has the right to know exactly how her body and her fertility works. I'm here to connect you with the tools and information you need to improve your menstrual cycle health and fertility. And I feel so privileged to be able to share my passion for body literacy and fertility awareness with you every single week. Fertility awareness is so much more than just birth control or trying to get pregnant, because it truly gives you a window into your own health and fertility. And I love sharing my expertise with my clients and helping them to understand their charts and connect with their cycles. If you've recently discovered fertility awareness but you're not feeling confident about using it for birth control just yet, or if you've been charting for a while and you're having trouble making sense of what's happening in your cycle, I can help. Get started today with a free 15-minute consultation with me by heading over to fertilityfriday.com/coaching, or just click the Work With Me button on my website. And I would also like to invite you to sign up for the Fertility Friday newsletter. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/ebook, and as a gift to you, you'll receive a free copy of my new ebook, where I reveal what to expect when coming off of hormonal contraceptives, and I share 5 steps to restoring healthy menstrual cycles post-pill. And today, I'm very excited to welcome my guest, Gabriella Rosa, to the show. Gabriella is one of Australia's leading natural fertility experts. Her compassionate approach to natural health care is aimed at educating, inspiring, and empowering couples. Gabriella holds a master's in reproductive medicine and human genetics from Sydney, Australia, or Sydney University, and she's also trained as a naturopathic practitioner. She specializes in the management of women's health issues from puberty to menopause, as well as men's health, weight loss, and natural fertility. Gabriella is also the founder and clinical director of Natural Fertility and Health Solutions, which is an integrative medicine practice where she leads a team of naturopaths who run her fertility programs. And she's also the author of 3 books on natural fertility solutions, including her book, Eat Your Way to Parenthood, The Diet Secrets of Highly Fertile Couples Revealed. I'm sure I could go on and on. But I'll let Gabriella do some of her own introduction as well. And in today's show, we'll be talking about fertility challenges and what some of the biggest barriers Gabriella sees in her practice of women to having a pregnancy. And so without further ado, welcome to the show, Gabriella.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I always ask my guests what inspired them to take this path. Did you always know you wanted to work in this field of fertility and reproductive health?
Yeah, actually, it was a very conscious decision from, all those years ago. I've been doing this for almost 20 years now. And from the very beginning, when I was graduating, I knew that I wanted to do something that made a real difference in the world, and that had a legacy attached to it, that would make a difference and that would, I guess, make the world a better place in my small little way, and I felt at the time that babies was a really great way of doing that, because if we could make sure that prospective parents were even more conscious around their decision to bring a healthy baby into the world and were able to do and put in place all of the things that would help them to achieve that outcome, that we would end up with babies that were more conscious and healthier and would have a greater positive impact in the world that we live in. And so I really started from that place. It really was a wish and a want to make the world a better place. And it never started necessarily being with the focus that we now have of treating couples with, severe and complex cases, and certainly many long-standing years of infertility. It really started with wanting to help people who wanted to have babies bring healthier babies into the world. And it just so happened that in that process, I started to attract a lot more people who were having difficulty and were having challenges conceiving. And very early from there, it so began that, the people who really were struggling were the people who were connecting with me more than anyone else. And so that's how the love affair started. And it's been, as I said, almost 20 years. We've helped couples literally all over the world. Thousands of people I've seen over the years, and it's been a wonderful ride. We've helped couples overcome infertility even when so many different things and treatments, IVF and more, have failed to bring healthy babies into the world. So I feel really privileged and very honored to be able to do that and to be able to help couples in that place.
Mm-hmm. I think that's wonderful. So many of the guests that I've interviewed have kind of fallen into it in one way or another, or perhaps had kind of some sort of life-changing experience that brought them into this work that they do. And so it's really interesting to hear that you very intentionally went into this field from the beginning with this plan. I think that that's amazing. And as you were talking, it occurred to me just to ask, were you ever surprised at the number of couples that you did find struggling with fertility challenges?
Look, it's a huge number of couples who struggle with infertility at the moment. I mean, there is a statistic in the World Health Organization website that says that about 80 million people worldwide hold, as they put it, a pregnancy or baby wish, the wish of having a child. And what we also know from statistical analysis, epidemiological research, is that 1 in 6 couples is infertile around the world. And that figure changes. The UK portrays it as a 1 in 3. There are other, different statistics, but overall, it's about 1 in 6 couples are infertile, which means that we all are touched. Our lives are all touched by someone or someones, who are struggling and who are having difficulty, even though we often don't know about it, because most people keep it quiet. Most people, it's a really personal struggle, and most people have such challenge in what it means for them and how it impacts them, but also people around them and family members and friends. And a lot of people also feel quite, what's the best word? I think inadequate is probably a word that comes to mind when we talk about fertility challenges. In fact, I read a statistic once that really made me just, feel so heavily for these people that are struggling because, and certainly the couples that we treat, but, it said it was a journal of nursing, I think it was, and it was talking about the fact that most women, 20% of women would prefer to be paralyzed than be infertile. And yeah, I know. And when I read that, I was like, wow, it's serious, and this was quite early on in my career. And I didn't quite realize the depth of despair that the challenges of conception can really bring. So was I surprised by the number of people? I don't think I was surprised by the number of people. I was more surprised by the depth of the despair of couples who experience infertility.
Wow, I feel
for long-standing periods,
Yeah, that statistic that you just went through, that I feel like I need to digest that for a minute. But it makes perfect sense because it's just that close to our hearts, our ability to conceive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that most people view the inability to conceive as, such a difficult challenge to accept because it's supposedly something that we should all be able to do. It's supposedly something that is natural and that people can do. And it's really interesting because over the years I have dubbed, there's a lot of people that come to me and they say, oh, why do I have to make all these changes? Why do I have to do anything when my neighbor, my friend, my sister, my brother, they drink, they smoke, they do drugs, they do all the wrong things and they're having babies left, right and center. Why is it that I have a healthy lifestyle, I exercise, I eat well, I do all the things that I should be doing and I'm infertile and I can't do this? And, I remember once very clearly having a lady in my office literally just be so angry and just burst out into this raging diatribe about why this was so unfair and why this was the case and why is it that I'm in this situation when all these people are not. And it was really fascinating because at that moment I realized yes, how unfair it is, or seemingly it is. But the reality is that there is an answer, and there is an answer that is based on science. And the fact is that our bodies, our genes, the way that our body operates, it's based on epigenetics, the way in which the environment impacts the way that our body works and how our body actually is able to do things. There's an interesting insight that brings, because if we think about this concept as a fact of, we've all heard of people who have smoked their entire life and didn't die of lung disease, right? Or didn't develop lung cancer. And we've also heard of people who have never smoked a day in their life and died of lung cancer, right? So when we think about it from that perspective, we go, okay, well, yeah, it's understandable where some people might do all the wrong things in regards to their fertility and still be able to get the outcome that they're looking for, and others don't. And that very much is that there are certain triggers in the environment that will impact certain people in different ways. So for some people, their sensitive area might be their digestive system. For another, it might be their lungs. For another, it might be their brain. For another, it might be their reproductive system, right? So that's essentially what happens. And so when a couple comes to me and they're saying to me, this is not happening and it hasn't been happening and it hasn't happened for X number of years, then we need to figure out, okay, what is the level at which you're operating right now? Because that level isn't going to get you to where you want to go. Right. Yeah. And that's really then where we need to up the ante and go, right, let's really get serious about figuring out what are all of the things that come to play, and we often talk in terms of minor factors, because minor factors generally can be anything from, a little bit of the thyroid not working as well as it could, or sperm being slightly deformed, or, weight not being exactly where it needs to be, or a diet that's not as good as it could be, and so on and so forth. So the problem is that minor factors have a compounding effect on each other and how they operate and how they impact fertility. And this is a really key aspect for couples to understand, because what happens is this: at peak fertility, right? So any couple at absolute peak fertility has a 20% chance of success in creating a healthy pregnancy, and an average of 3 months to pregnancy. Okay. So that's at absolute best of the best, peak fertility. That's what we would expect. Now, if you just add one minor factor to that situation, so it might be that a couple has, or a woman has endometriosis, or a man has a varicocele. Okay, so those are all minor factors. If that was to be the case, we add one minor factor to the equation, all of a sudden we reduce the success rate, or the chance of success, from a 20% to 5%, and we increase the average time to pregnancy from 3 months to 2 years. Right. So that already is an increase, like it's a compounded effect of that one thing. You add one extra minor factor to that, and all of a sudden we go from a 5% success rate or chance of conception to a 1% chance of conception, and an average time to pregnancy that then goes up to from 2 years to 7 years. Right. Yeah. And you just have to add one extra minor factor to the equation. And you can pick anything, thyroid, whatever it is that we've already mentioned. And all of a sudden we go from a 1% success rate to a 0.2% success rate, and an average time to pregnancy that increases to 40 years, right?
Well, doesn't that put it into perspective, right?
That's right, right? So no one has 40 years to get pregnant. And so really when it comes to infertility, it's never going to be the big things. Mostly, some cases it is. Some cases you end up doing a semen analysis and it comes back with 0 sperm, and, a woman might have blocked fallopian tubes, or might be lacking, fallopian tubes, or might have uterine dysfunction, or whatever it is, which are more major factors that are very often easily and quickly diagnosed, because those are obvious things. However, what often happens, and this is what I see in my practice all the time, are couples who literally are left scratching their head going, why in the world is this not happening? Mm-hmm. I have tried and done everything. And this is what they say to me. They say to me, I've done everything. And I go, well, yes, everything you knew.
Yeah.
Because you see, this is what happens, and this is what I see very, very often. Couples often do everything they know and they feel they've done everything. However, what I know 100% of the time of the couples that I see is that what really is getting in their way is what they don't know, they don't know.
Oh, it's so funny you say that, because I always say that in terms of, well, I usually talk about it in terms of fertility awareness, but it's so true. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And you can go on thinking that you know something, but how would you know that you don't know?
Exactly. Exactly. And it's often not until someone actually points it out to you and you really have that, clearer perspective that you go, oh, yeah, okay, I get that now. But yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Well, and, I couldn't agree more. And one of the things that you mentioned kind of in the beginning is just how couples come to you after such a long period of time. I think on your website, it looks as though you accept couples only who've been struggling for quite some time. Is that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, in your practice, what are some of those barriers? What are some of the things that are preventing couples from conceiving and then working with you and being able to conceive after such a long time of not getting the outcome that they wanted?
Yes, so it's a great question, and there are many different aspects that get in the way, and I think that that's really where sometimes couples expect, because it is supposed to be an easy and natural thing to happen, have a baby, right? We expect that it's just it should just be easy and it should just happen. It should just happen. And when it doesn't, we're often left scratching our heads going, oh, but hang on a second, what's actually getting in the way? And other than the obvious things, it's really quite funny, because whenever I talk to couples and I ask them, what do you think's actually getting in the way of you not being able to conceive? And most of the time, seriously, if I could have $1 for every time I hear the answer, oh, I think I could improve my diet, or I could improve, I could exercise more. And we're like, yeah, okay, but what else do you really think is getting in the way? Because the reality is that there's lots of people out there that don't have good diets and don't exercise and get pregnant, right? So, and when we prod further, they're like, oh, I don't know. I really don't know. So there is a real lack of education around what actually can make a difference in a couple's situation, in a couple's case. And I think most couples don't even know what those things are. The answer is actually quite simple. And when you ask me, what, for me, because I've been doing this for 20 years, right? I look at it and I go, oh yeah, it's simple. Most people though going through this, they're not going to think it's simple because they don't really have the expertise to be able to handle it themselves. And the more research that people do and go into Google and look at this and look at that, the more confusing it all becomes, right? Because one person says, oh, you need to do Chinese herbs. Oh, you need to do acupuncture. Oh, you need, actually what you really need is Amazonian monkey pee. If you do that, it's all gonna work, right? And so couples kind of just go around in this fog of oh my God, all these things, and what do I do, and what is the truth and what's not, and how do I actually put this in place? And so then they start to approach the situation in a kind of broken way already. It's almost like if infertility is this massive brick wall in front of us, and we're trying to get through to the other side, which is where the baby is, and we need a path to get there, but the brick wall is in the way, right? Most couples will approach infertility and that brick wall by taking one brick out, which might be the herbs or the exercise or the diet, and doing that for a while and going, okay, I'm doing that. I've taken the brick out, and, I can see my path, but I can't squeeze through that little hole. And I can see that it's not quite happening in the way that it needs to, but they don't really know how long they need to do it for or what it is that they need to do. However, and they also don't really know that the answer really isn't in taking out one brick. The answer is in taking out the whole wall. So what I talk about with my patients is actually what we need to do is bring the bulldozer, right? Bring the bulldozer, bulldoze the wall, get rid of it, clean up the mess, build the path, and then you can walk on it to your outcome, right? So when we ask that question of what are some of the things that can get in the way, well, that could be a multitude of different things, from radiation to chemicals to dietary impact to biochemistry to genetics to, you name it. There are so many different things that can happen and can get in the way of a couple's inability to conceive and keep a healthy pregnancy to term. So really what we need to do and what we need to look at from that perspective is, and this is what we do in my practice, we look at it from a very systematic area of checking out things that are in place and that need to be in place, and the things that aren't, that need to either be removed or added, right? So things like, biochemistry is obviously going to make a big difference. And biochemistry is impacted in so many different ways, right? So it can be from the things that we do, the things that we are in contact with, the things that we ingest, the things that even our thoughts, interestingly, can impact our biochemistry. Levels of stress, all of that will have an impact. So it's difficult to actually give you an answer as to, this is the area or these are the things that people need to look at, because there are so many different things, right? And when we talk about the 11 pillars of fertility or, the 11 pillars of fertility or even the 7-step fertile method that I've put together, really what we're looking at are the big category reasons, right? And from there, we then branch out into the clues. I guess the best way to describe what we do as a team, we are kind of like Sherlock Holmes. Like we are the Sherlock Holmes of infertility, I would have to say. Because really what we do is we really get that big thing out, whatever that thing is called. What is it that they do? The detectives have? It's the magnifying glass. That's right. Yeah. The magnifying glass. So, we get it out and we really are very focused on what are all of the little things that can happen. Part of the self-care aspects that people can actually impact and make a difference to, the basics and are the obvious, right? So that's where I always talk about acting pregnant now to get pregnant later, right? In acting pregnant now, what you're doing is you're doing everything as a team. You and your partner are doing everything you possibly can. Let's just imagine, and I think the guys have the most difficulty with this, but let's just imagine that you could be pregnant, right? Even if just for a little moment. I mean, if men could be pregnant, we probably would end up with population minus, however many, because I think that giving birth would prove to be a very challenging experience that they would want to, go all together. And boys, I'm not teasing. I'm just teasing. I'm not being serious here. I know that you're all very tough and, will do everything that you need to do. But really what it comes down to is very simple, is that if you could be pregnant right now, right, and we have to remember that, like it or not, both male and female partners have 50% of that little baby that they want to create within them already right now. Right. So we have to nurture and nourish those cells just as if they were little babies in the making, right? Potential little babies there. So if we were to imagine that you are pregnant right now, what are all of the things that you would either start doing or you would stop doing to improve and nurture and nourish and care for that little baby you are developing right now within yourself? That really is the ultimate question. And that really is what helps us to then understand part of that act pregnant now to get pregnant later situation. Because if you already know that in order to nourish and nurture and care for that little baby that you are developing right now, you need to improve your health, you need to improve your diet, you need to improve your lifestyle, you need to stop doing certain things. So all of the things that you would stop doing if you were pregnant right now, right, are all of the things that you will stop doing if you're trying to get pregnant.
What do you think is the disconnect there? I think everyone listening, not just me, we all know women and men, because in our culture, we don't even think about men, say, having a healthy diet when, they're trying. We don't really think that they're part of the equation for some reason. But where's the disconnect? Because I personally, know lots of women who, I don't know, when they're trying to get pregnant, they're still doing the same things as they were doing before, drinking, smoking, whatever, all the things that we know intuitively that we shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the disconnect really lies in the lack of understanding that most people have about the fact that it takes at least, and this is at least 120 days for the egg to mature and the sperm to form, right? In fact, the egg takes much longer. The egg takes really truly 8 months from primordial follicle, which is the follicles that we are all born with, to primary follicle takes 4 months. From primary follicle to ovulatory follicle takes another 4 months, right? So it takes that long for us to actually improve the quality of the egg. And quality of the egg is absolutely able to be improved if you do the right things, right? And the right things will depend and vary for every person, right? So there's not a blanket thing that I can say, yep, go and do, drink Amazonian monkey pee and you're going to be okay, right? It's really about like figuring out what are the things that are getting in the way for that specific person and what needs to happen from the supplements that they need to take to, because, I also don't believe in just blanket supplementation, and I don't believe in self-prescription, because often couples spend and waste so much time, so much effort, so much money, because that is one of the bricks in the brick wall. Mm-hmm. Right. And so they go, oh yeah, supplementation is the answer. That's it. That's what I need to do. I'm going to go and take that brick off the wall. And they do that forever, but they fail to recognize and realize that that is just one of the bricks on the wall. It is not the whole wall. Right. So I'm very conscious of telling people that they need to take this XYZ supplement, because essentially they're going to think often that, oh, that's all I need to do. I'm taking my supplement, so it should be okay. Mm-hmm. Right. But again, going back to the disconnect, is that the disconnect really is in the fact that people don't understand. They don't realize the education that it takes time. You see, the health of your fertility today are a combination or an amalgamation of all of the choices that you've made, certainly over your lifetime, but predominantly over that last 120 days. So if you want to have a baby, a healthy baby in the future, you must focus on prioritizing everything that you do in order to increase your odds of having the healthiest possible cells within you right now, so that you can see the result in 4 months from now or more, right? For sometimes in the practice, when we treat men that have problematic sperm, from morphology issues to motility or whatever else is going on, sometimes it can take us up to 3 sperm cycles. And a sperm cycle for men is about 120 days, right? It can take us up to 3 sperm cycles to really see a proper change in their semen analysis result. And most people are just too impatient. Right? Mm-hmm. That's why I believe so many people end up being herded down the path of IVF or this or that, where minor factors aren't addressed, aren't taken care of, and are still going to negatively impact that cycle from actually yielding the healthy baby of their dreams, because they're not prepared to look at and do the work that is required to address the factors that are going to actually get in the way, and that by addressing those factors is actually going to give them the best possible chance of not only conceiving but taking home the healthy baby of their dreams.
Yeah, you're touching on so many important points there, and it makes me think about how often, just something that you said earlier, people seem to think it's so simple. For some reason, I'm not sure how the idea got out there, but for some reason, just like you said at the very beginning, that people think that it's going to be so easy, that for some reason a person can have an incredibly complicated kind of collection of challenges with regards to their fertility. But for some reason, they think that they can take a supplement and that's going to fix everything. And I've kind of encountered a little bit of that in some of the work that I do with women, where they're coming to you, and as you kind of go through and kind of discuss all the things that they've had challenges with, whether it's, gut health or whether it's thyroid issues or whatever. And it just keeps coming. But there's a disconnect as to how each factor could be an impairment to fertility. And you have all of these factors, you know what I'm saying? And then,
absolutely.
But the person's, it's just something about our culture, and there's the disconnect there. Oh, I'll just take some vitamin D.
Yeah, that's right. And also what I see often too is and the disconnect continues and it gets worse, because what happens is that a woman or a couple will go to a doctor, and the first thing they'll say, oh, you have no time to waste. Just, you have to go straight to IVF. Mm-hmm. And it's and often they haven't been even asked, do you smoke? Do you do drugs? Do you only eat KFC and chips? Do you, and these are things that, mind you don't have to be any PhD on natural methods, right, to figure out from a mainstream scientific journal. If you go in Fertility, Sterility, mainstream scientific journal, that it's almost every month it comes up with something to do with lifestyle factors and the impact that it has on negative IVF outcome, right? So it's not like the message isn't getting out there to doctors. It's that ultimately there is a huge industry out there. And again, it's not to say that this is bad, right? And I don't believe that IVF is bad. In fact, I recommend, I sometimes have to refer some of our patients to IVF. My background, as you've mentioned, is I'm trained as a naturopathic practitioner, but I also have a master's in reproductive medicine and human genetics. So really I'm coming from a very scientific approach of blending the best of both worlds, really looking at the self-care aspects, but also really basing and grounding myself on the scientific things that are going to make a difference, you know. So I'm not speaking out of this like woo-woo, oh yes, this is, you know, you should take care of your diet because, you know, you just should and you should just believe me. It's like, no, this is actually documented evidence. So whether people choose to take it on board or not is another story. You know, you mentioned earlier in regards to men and us not really talking about the impact of diet on men. Again, it's not for lack of it being published in the scientific data, right? In fact, a couple of years ago, there was a study that was published talking about specifically the impact of junk food on male fertility and specifically on count, morphology and motility. And all of those three parameters, which when, they're not where they need to be, can constitute a triple defect. Having a triple defect will dramatically reduce the chances of a natural conception occurring, right? So the reality is that this specific research study that was performed really outlined the outcome was very, very simple, that junk food does and will negatively impact taking home a healthy baby. Mm-hmm. The chances of actually not only getting pregnant but keeping a pregnancy to term, we now know that male sperm and fertility is 50% the equation when it comes to a miscarriage. Mm. Right. So a miscarriage, it used to be, we used to think or used to be kind of propagated out there that, a miscarriage is to do with the woman and there's something wrong with her and something wrong with her egg and whatever else. Now we understand much better. We understand that it's a 50-50 equation. So if a miscarriage or recurrent miscarriage is happening, we need to look at the male partner and the sperm and figure out, right, what are the areas here that need to be improved, that must be improved in order for a couple to take home a healthy baby. So it is very much a couple process. In fact, that's why in my practice, other than, of course, the couples that we see that are either same-sex couples or women going through solo reproduction, we don't take on couples who are not on the same page about doing a process together as a team, because essentially if we're going to be using his sperm and her eggs, we want to make sure that we are addressing the full equation, not just, one part of the equation. So yeah, it's a really important discussion. And I think that we need to be bringing out more and more awareness into the world about that for sure.
Isn't it interesting that we've reached a point in our wonderful advanced society that we need a scientific study to tell us not to eat junk food? And even though there is a scientific study, the doctor isn't telling you to stop eating it. I mean, what's going on? There was a time, I feel like, when people had common sense and that time is gone. Like, I don't know. You know what I mean, right? Like, you shouldn't need a scientific journal to tell you that when you're trying to conceive, you shouldn't eat the junk. Like, but this is where we're at.
It's actually really fascinating, Lisa. I'll just tell you a little story. Some years ago, this is actually quite several years back now. I think it's probably more than about 10 to 15 years ago, where this information was already very, very mainstream. We already knew that smoking and being obese negatively impacted the chances of a couple going through IVF having a healthy baby, right? So there was this kind of like local IVF talk, kind of explanation about the process for couples who are experiencing fertility problems. And I remember sitting through this talk feeling quite disheartened about the fact that, it was the whole talk was really about the fact that you shouldn't even worry about or even try to conceive naturally, because what would be the point in doing that? But then the clanger for me, the straw that broke the camel's back, was when one of the partners in the couple stood up, and the couple, you could see obviously his wife, it was a guy actually who stood up to ask the question, and his wife was sitting down next to him, and you could clearly see that they were very obese. They were very, very obese. And he stood up and he asked the question, if we decide to do IVF, do we have to stop smoking and do we have to lose weight? And literally as fast as a bullet, like as fast as you can possibly imagine, this doctor at the front goes, no, not at all. Not at all. You don't need to do any of that. And I was like, oh my God, that's where I'm leaving. This is just ridiculous, right? And mind you, these days you have some amazing, amazing doctors and clinics who are very proactive and who, will guide couples in a different direction, which is really what's needed. And it's just so disappointing, to still have this situation where I have conversations with couples all the time who basically are telling me that they were being told that, yes, IVF is the next step. Go and do IVF. 1 cycle didn't work. 2 cycles didn't work. 3 cycles didn't work. And they're like, no, hang on a second. We need to have a look at this further. And to be told that, can I do something? Is there anything that I can actually do to improve my chances? To be told that, no, there's nothing you can do. Just, it's a numbers game. Keep going.
Yeah.
I just go, oh my God.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why so many women, couples, so many people are seeking alternative care, if for no other reason than not feeling like you're being heard and being dissatisfied with the experience of, because there's something, I think, inside of us, our intuition, that tells us that there's something wrong with this picture, because we all kind of know somewhere deep inside that it does make a difference.
And that there is more you can do.
Yeah. So when a doctor tells you there's nothing you can do, there's a part of you that says, and it's whether you're listening to that or not, but it's there, and you hear it when you talk to women, because they just feel like, no, there has to be something else. You're telling me nothing I do makes a difference. So I'd love to talk a little bit about the 11 pillars. So as when we had our pre-interview chat, we won't be able to go through 11 pillars in our conversation today, but I feel like when I look at the 11 pillars, and I'll link to your website so the listeners can go and, read more on each pillar and get a little bit more information. But when I look through that list, it's very comprehensive, and it's not all diet and supplementation. I mean, stress management, rest and relaxation, so much there. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that and why you kind of developed that process.
Yeah, it's actually fascinating, because the reason that I developed the process was because I started to realize very early on that there were so many things to look at, and I didn't want to miss anything. I didn't want to be in a situation where you miss the basics, because missing the basics is what gets people going around in circles for so many years, still not getting the result that they want. And I say it's really quite fascinating, because I run this program. It's a free program that couples participate in. It's called the 14-Day Fertility Challenge. And it happens a few times a year. And what happens in that program is that I take people through the 11 pillars, but in a way of giving them the empowerment of actually going and doing and changing the things that are going to make a difference, right? So we really focus on very clearly outlining what the different areas are that will make a difference, and the things that they can do that will help them moving forward in their process. So some of the things that are very basic within the 11 pillars, of course, diet and exercise have to be there. They are the foundation of good health. And when we talk about good health, we really want to make sure that we are addressing that part of ourselves where we already know. I mean, as you said, Lisa, you said, and it's so true, we all know what we need to do to be healthy. We all know. If you were to ask anybody out there and say, look, if there was one thing that you could do to improve your health, what would it be? They will tell you 5, 10, things that they probably could be doing. So it's a matter of the fact that knowing is not the same as doing, right? And when you know and you don't do, it's the same as not knowing. Right. So this is not rocket science. It's basic, and it's fundamental, and it's foundational. And it's certainly foundational to our treatment, but it's really, these are things that can be actually implemented quite easily. So diet and exercise, sleep is a really key one. And I think that a lot of people underestimate the importance of sleep for general health, but also for fertility. What we know is that melatonin is incredibly important for egg quality and sperm quality. It peaks at around 9 p.m. at night. Right. So if you're not sleeping or in a kind of very rested situation at that point, you're going to miss that peak. And missing that peak is certainly going to decrease the amount of melatonin circulating within the body, which then will help to improve or not the quality of egg and the quality of sperm. Right. So sleep is key. Sleep is also very, very important for stress management. So when we're not actually having the quality of sleep that we need to, our fertility is going to suffer. And there are many, many, many reasons as to why people don't get the quality of sleep that they need, particularly in this day and age. Facebook on their phones and tablets and whatever else before going to bed at night is not going to be helpful for your sleep and or your fertility. So, it's going back to basics. It's really looking at how does the body work and operate best and doing everything that we need to do in regards to that. Stress is an interesting pillar because a lot of people feel that stress impacts them, so they stress about stressing. And, that's never a good combination. But, at the same time, it is important to have a practice where you can just decompress, on a daily basis. There was a thing that I saw actually recently on Facebook about this psychologist talking to a group about stress and what it was kind of like, giving an analogy of what it really looked like. She was talking about, she had a glass of water in her hand and she asked an audience, how heavy is this glass of water? And, people kind of started to give ideas of how heavy it was. And then she basically said, look, it's actually not really even about how heavy it is. It's about how long you hold on to it for. Because the longer you hold on to it, right now it's okay. You can hold it for an hour and it's going to be fine. At the end of a few hours, your arms, your fingers, your hand is probably going to go numb and you're not going to feel anything. At the end of a day, you're going to be completely almost paralyzed by holding that very inoffensive glass of water, right? And so the same applies in every other aspect of our lives. We have little niggly things that we hold on to and we start living from previous and past circumstances and situations, and we hold on to those things for, to grim death, as they say in Australia. And it's not helpful. It's not helpful for every aspect of our lives, especially for our fertility. So relaxation is going to be important. Work-life balance is going to be important, and mind you, balance is an interesting thing because we can only be measured, degrees away from balance, right? So we're never actually going to achieve perfect balance. We're going to always be striving to it. And I think that there's a lot to be said for that analogy in the whole of the fertility discussion as well, because we often think that we should just not have to do anything and everything should just happen. And the reality is that, that's not really quite how it works, right? If you're not doing, and this is what I encourage, that's what the 14-day fertility challenge is all about, is actually let's figure out what are all of the things that you can actually do. How can you take charge? What are the things that are actually going to make a difference? So this is one very important aspect. Then, one of the other pillars of fertility is certainly going to be nutritional supplementation. It's not that it's not an important pillar. It is. But that's where self-prescription can be problematic because you think that, I'll just, read blogs online and go to websites that are selling stuff and believe that that's what I should be taking. Where in some cases it's exactly the opposite of what you should be taking. How many times have I seen people who, have purchased things online and I go through their case and I go through their situation and have a look at their bloods, have a look at what's going on for them. And in fact, what they're taking is counterproductive. Right? It's the opposite of what they should be doing. So I find that is one of the biggest areas that are problematic in regards to people wanting to do, because mostly people want to do the best that they can for themselves, right? And that's an area that often backfires when people, try and work on themselves. At the same time, what done properly and done effectively, supplementation can really be a very good insurance policy. to making sure that you have all of the foundational aspects in place that are going to make a difference in one's particular circumstance. So that's going to be important. And then, of course, there's environmental challenges. Environmental challenges is a huge pillar because everything that we do in our day-to-day, from cooking utensils to the things we put in our body, to the cleaning products that we use, to household items, to furniture that we buy, to, seriously, it's a can of worms. And, one of the things that really needs to happen in order for that to be optimized as an area is a couple needs to be looked at holistically. Right. So you need to really, and there's a lot of information out there in regards to this, and figuring out what's right and what's wrong can also be a little bit challenging. However, common sense, as you said, needs to be reinstated, right? We need to bring back common sense, because the things that are common sense are going to serve us well no matter what. And again, always go back to, if unsure, always go back to the question, if I was pregnant right now, would this be okay? Would this be something that I would do, right? Because most of the time, I don't know if you've been pregnant before, Lisa. Sorry, I'm not sure.
I have twice.
Right. Okay. So you will know that second that you get pregnant, you become just completely obsessed with, is this going to be okay for my baby? And so that's exactly what people need to start becoming obsessed with now. Is it going to be okay for my baby? Because if it's not going to be okay for your baby, trust me, it's not going to be okay for you right now if you're trying to conceive, right? So that's kind of, in every one of these pillars, you really want to be starting to ask that question, because if you ask that question and you implement and you work according to that principle, right, you are going to make much better decisions overall. Mm-hmm. Make sense?
Absolutely. Well, and as I was preparing for this interview, I was taking a look at your website, and you have a number of success stories. I was wondering if you wanted to share a story of one of the clients that kind of was close to your heart, someone who had been trying to conceive and followed your protocols and was successful in not just getting pregnant, but having a healthy, thriving baby.
Yeah, look, I can't pick one. I will share one that comes to mind, which is the one that just comes to mind the most for me because of the sheer length of years, number of years that this couple was trying to conceive. And in saying that, gosh, quite seriously, all of our success stories, and you'll see we have so many on our website, and so many that aren't on our website that we need to put up there. And at the same time, they are all really special to me because they all represent that point, that place where people were really struggling and really didn't know what they didn't know, and they were brave and they were courageous to actually put their hand up and go, hey, you know what? I know that I don't have the answers and I need help and I need to do something about this, and that to me is just so heartwarming to know that we have been able to help, a couple in that situation. So that's why all of the stories that we have are just so very close to my heart. This one though was a couple who, the woman came to me, she was kind of not really that into it, to be honest. She came to me because her husband was like, you know what, no, we have to do this, we have to go. And so she decided that, okay, fine, let's just do this as a one last thing, and then we're done with this. And the reason that she felt that way is because she had 3 failed IVF attempts. She had irregular cycles pretty much for her entire life. And at the time that they came to see me, they had unprotected intercourse trying to conceive and have a baby for 19 years. Right? 19 years. That's 19. And by the time she came to me, she was 43. So you can imagine that, she would have had her fair share of disappointments month after month after month after month for almost 20 years. And you could imagine how that would affect a person and would color a person's view and model of the world. Yet she was open enough to have a conversation and be open to the possibility of hope that something could be different, that something could actually make a difference in her case. And so, we started to implement the things that we needed to implement and put in place the things that needed to be done. She needed to lose weight. She was quite overweight, and she was doing a really good job at doing that and putting in place all the things that she needed to put in place. And we did our preparation. And after a little while, they started trying to conceive, and it was quite funny because they started trying to conceive, and then one day she canceled her appointment and I followed up with her and I didn't hear from her. And I thought, okay, that's fine. I'll just, give her a couple of weeks and I'm sure she's going to book back in because she was very consistent doing everything that she needed to be doing. And then I didn't hear from her. I thought, that's strange. Let me call her up. So I called her up and I said, hey, what's going on? I haven't heard from you in a while. Let's catch up. Left her a message because she didn't answer. And I thought, okay, that's fine. Then I got my assistant, my receptionist, to call her up and make an appointment for her. And she said, oh, look, I'm still feeling really sick. I just don't feel well. I've had a viral infection. I just haven't been well. And I just wanted to just give me a couple more weeks. So in a couple more weeks, I tell my receptionist, you make sure that I see this woman no matter what, because now we really need to kind of figure out what's going on. And if she's still sick, we need to sort that out because obviously she's trying to conceive. So she called, made the appointment. Then, the lady came and I said, what happened? Like, I haven't seen you in ages. And, had been by that stage, I think it had been about 6 weeks. And, what's going on? What's going on? Tell me everything that's been happening. And so she started and she's telling me, oh, I've had this viral infection. I've been so sick. I've been, vomiting and just, my supplements, I can't even take them. I've just been so unwell and my energy is not where it needs to be. And I just had fevers and I'm like, that's really strange. That sounds really odd. Have you done a pregnancy test? And she turned around to me and she said, don't be ridiculous. I'm not pregnant. I said, quite fascinating you should say that. You're doing a fertility program after all. Let's do a pregnancy test just in case, right? I totally get it. It's possible that you're not pregnant at all. In fact, I know you've had 19 years of that being the case, but let's just do a pregnancy test. And she, in that as well, she said, my cycles were being so regular and then they stopped coming all together again. And I'm like, okay, we really need to do a pregnancy test. Let's just do that. So she basically said to me that she was going to do it. She wasn't actually very thrilled about the prospect, but she said, okay, fine, I'll do it. And I said, do it and let me know immediately, either way, yes or no. If you're not pregnant, that's fine. We'll just do what else we need to do. But if you are, then obviously we need to know. So she went away and didn't do a pregnancy test. So 3 days later, I call her up and I go, excuse me, what's going on? You haven't done your pregnancy test. You haven't got back to me. Or have you done your pregnancy test and you haven't got back to me? Which one, And so she basically said, no, I haven't done my pregnancy test because I just haven't been able to get a test. I'm like, what planet are you living in? Get a pregnancy test done. So anyway, I called her husband after that. So after I spoke to her, called her husband. I said, look, here's the thing. I need you to go and get a pregnancy test now because I need this woman to take a pregnancy test. She said, I've had the biggest fight with her because I've been telling her exactly that. And I've told her, get the pregnancy test done. And she just wouldn't do it. So I said, look, that's okay. You just go and get the pregnancy test and make sure that she does it. The very next day she calls me up. She goes, Gabriella, look, I just want to let you know, I've taken the pregnancy test and I've taken there were 3 in the pack and I've taken all of them. 2 were positive. 1 was not. And I just really don't think I'm pregnant. I'm like, 2 are positive, 1 was not. And you don't think you're pregnant. You are pregnant. Let's go and do a blood test and just figure it out. And she goes, yeah, but I just, they're really only 99.9% accurate. I just think it's, I don't know.
I can see that after trying for 20 years, she couldn't allow that possibility.
She couldn't grasp it. She just could not. Like literally when she told me, the pregnancy test is only 99.9% accurate, I'm like, yeah, 99.9% accurate.
They're testing for a hormone that's only there when you're that's right. That story could make me cry. I don't know if you have that TV show over there in Australia. That show, I didn't know I was pregnant, I think it's called.
No.
So there's this show, I don't have cable anymore because I have this addiction problem to TV. So I just cut it out altogether because I watch all the, the shows I shouldn't watch. So they suck all your time. But there's a show that I used to watch from time to time. And I think it's called I Didn't Know I Was Pregnant. And it would be a thing where a couple had been trying for years. And they get to the point where they just give up and they just, they've been told that they can't conceive and it's been 10 years. And then, you wake up in the middle of the night with a stomach pain and then you go to the bathroom and then you push a baby out over the toilet. And it's the same kind of thing. And you have to wonder, you're like, well, when the person then looks back at their experiences, then they say, oh, well, I was feeling kind of ill and I just thought it was stuff. I thought it was gas.
That's it.
But you can kind of appreciate how that is because pregnancy is completely out of the realm
of their brain. Absolutely.
Now.
100%. And you know what was so funny about her is that after I told her, okay, fine, now that we have a positive pregnancy test, even if it was just one, we need to go and check this out further. So let's go and have a blood test. So she went and had a blood test, did all the things. I had a look at her HCG because what happens is in the beginning of a pregnancy, HCG goes very high and then it kind of just like plateaus. It goes down a bit and it plateaus. And, as you get further along. And so the reason that the pregnancy test that came back negative, out of the 3 came back negative wasn't because she wasn't pregnant. It was because she was, by the time we found out, 17 weeks pregnant.
Oh my God.
So she was literally halfway through her pregnancy. Right. And that was what happened. And it was almost that story of like, and she had no idea. She had absolutely no idea that she was pregnant. So to me, that probably is going to be the story that I'm going to take to my grave with me and just feel completely honored to have been part of that journey. There are so many, but that's a funny one that I will always remember.
Wow. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that story with us. I just have a few final questions to end the interview today. But before I ask them, I just wanted to ask you, for all of the listeners who have kind of been enthralled by our conversation today, what's the one thing that you'd want them to take away from this interview?
It's this: keep the faith, do what it takes, and enjoy the ride.
Love that.
That's the big message. I think that it's so easy to get caught up in thinking that your life will be better and that you'll be happy once XYZ thing happens, once you have a baby, once this happens or that happens. The reality is that day will never really come. It's if we're not appreciative and grateful of what we have now and have the ability to really find happiness where we are, when you have a baby and you are sleep deprived is not going to be the time where you're actually going to be recognizing how blessed you are. Let me just say that from a mother of 2 myself. And my baby is currently 11 months. So I know that well. So it's, that is the big message, keep the faith because without it, nothing will change. You need to know that there is a glimmer of hope that you keep working towards something, do what it takes because it's not going to happen without you actually doing what it takes. It's really interesting. There is a current, the 14-day challenge is on at the moment as we speak. And what's really fascinating is that one person went in there today and commented and said this. She said that she didn't realize up until now how her inability to focus on what needed to be done up until this point has stopped her so much, right? Because she just thought that it was just going to happen and that she didn't really have to work at it. And the reality and what her big realization was that, well, actually I do have to work at it. And unless I do, it's not going to happen. So the doing what it takes makes all of the difference. And, then of course, enjoying the ride is the key.
Mm-hmm. Well, 2 final questions for you. I have a feeling that you've touched on this, but I always ask these questions towards the end. What would you say is the biggest myth about fertility that you would like to see corrected?
I think that the biggest myth is that there is nothing you can do. That is the biggest myth. I think that if couples just realize that there is so much they can do and they start to actually do it, because again, knowing and not doing is the same as not knowing. Right. So if they do and they start to implement, it's amazing what changes can occur.
Mm-hmm. And last question of the day, for a woman who is listening and she's currently on hormonal contraceptives, she doesn't want to get pregnant now, but she does know that she wants to have a baby in the future, maybe in 2 to 3 years. What advice, if any, would you give to her?
I would tell her to get off the contraceptives now. Right, because for some women it can take literally years for hormones to rebalance, and I would go for a barrier method contraceptive as opposed to condoms, fertility awareness, lots of different techniques and tools out there to be able to really figure out what's going on. I actually use natural contraceptive methods from fertility awareness and a few other different ways for 10 years and with great success. And I've helped many of our couples, who later wanted to kind of pause between babies and so on, achieve that same result. Of course, as you know, and Lisa, you teach this all the time, so you know how much it actually takes the intense focus in the beginning to really understand what's going on with your cycle and your patterns and everything else. However, it is so very rewarding when you do and you understand your body and you know exactly what the rhythms and ebbs and flows of your body actually are. So if you're wanting to get pregnant in the next 3 years, get off hormonal contraceptive now.
Well, wonderful words to end on. Gabriella, thank you so much for being here today. It was such a pleasure getting to pick your brain and to talk to you about the work that you do. I'm just thrilled with our conversation, and I'm really excited to share it with our listeners. So thank you so much.
No, look, it's my absolute pleasure. It's lovely to talk to you. Thank you for having me.
Well, you're welcome. And where can our listeners go to learn more about you and the work that you do?
They can go to www.naturalfertilitybreakthrough.com. That's naturalfertilitybreakthrough.com. And, of course, our Facebook page as well, which is Natural Fertility Breakthrough.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode at fertilityfriday.com/89. I loved this conversation with Gabriella for so many different reasons, but I think what I enjoyed the most was the hope that she gives when talking about infertility and really delving into the reasons behind it. One of the things that I hear from my clients so often is their dissatisfaction with their experiences, whether it's from their medical doctors or fertility specialists. And the reason for that dissatisfaction is because when these medical professionals who are trained in the traditional model of medical care are assessing the problem, they're often not looking at the root cause. Women want to know. We want to know, why am I not getting pregnant? What is preventing me from getting pregnant? What is impairing my chances? Why am I not seeing any cervical mucus? Or why is my menstrual cycle falling outside of the normal parameters? And one of the things that I love about Gabriella's approach is that she really delves into what is happening, what is wrong with your cycle, and finding out those answers. And so I hope you enjoyed my interview with Gabriella. If you did enjoy today's show, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode at fertilityfriday.com/89. If you've been enjoying the podcast, please look for it on iTunes and leave a 5-star review so that more people can find it. And make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com and join my email list. If you have an idea for a podcast episode or a guest suggestion, send me an email at info@fertilityfriday.com. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I appreciate all of you for taking the time to tune into the podcast, whether you're on the go or commuting to work. So thanks again. And as always, until next time, be well and happy charting.